A couple minutes, we only have 18 on. We give it a couple more minutes, Bob.
Yeah, I think so. think this would be a good time to start.
Okay. Welcome. Good afternoon. I hope where you are it's sunny because it is a little bit sunny where I am and it's wonderful. So welcome to the third session in our series of virtual comp camps to assist and support you in developing your district's comprehensive school counseling and guidance program. Today, we're going to focus on data and the collection and use and interpretation of that data. We do ask that you enter your name and email in the chat if you would like to receive a certificate of attendance for this session. And please give us about a week to get the certificates emailed out to you. So welcome. We are your trainers. My name is Nancy DeStefano, and I'm a retired assistant superintendent for the Washington, Saratoga, and Warren Hamilton, Essex BOCES. I have also served as a director of counseling and as a school counselor, and I currently do professional development for NYSCA. Mary?
Hi, I'm Mary Benazak. I was a school counselor for 35 years in Victor, near Rochester, New York. And I'm excited to be president-elect for NYSCA, taking over in July. I'm glad to be here today and provide this professional development to all of you. So today we're going to begin talking about data. The word data means facts and statistics that are collected together for reference or analysis. And when we did the comp camps over the summer, we heard from a lot of folks that data was the hardest thing for them to wrap their heads around. We study data in education. We use it every day in our work, and sometimes we just take it for granted. We don't really see it for what it is. So today we're going to look at how we can study data in education to help better inform how we deliver services or provide support to students who need it. We also use data to determine the effectiveness of our strategies and if we are achieving our goals. So the New York State Education Department worked with NYSCA, and they have created a school district perspective guideline that can be found on the State Ed website. We've included the link right here on this slide at the bottom of the slide if you'd like to take a look at it. The document refers to how to use data to develop a data-driven comprehensive school counseling plan. The school district perspective is really a summary guidance document that was created and developed in collaboration between SED and NYSCA to help schools in the process of developing their comprehensive school counseling and guidance plan. As I said, as school counselors, we certainly use lots of different types of data every day, and we collect it in various ways. And we're going to talk a little bit about those different data forms and how they provide a different picture of our school counseling program that drives student success. There are three types of data referenced in the school district perspective: outcome data, perception data, and process data. Outcome data really measures the impact and effectiveness of our school counseling program on student outcomes. Perception data captures the subjective experiences and opinions of various stakeholders involved in the school counseling program. And process data is information about the activities and services that we deliver as school counselors and the number of stakeholders you serve. So let's take each one at a time. We're going to start with the outcome data that the SED referenced in their comprehensive guidance document. Outcome data could include any of these items on the list. Certainly, we review course pass and failure rates, attendance rates, graduation rates, tardies, suspensions, You may look at what courses your students are enrolling in. You may receive information about scholarships that your students have received. We certainly keep track of GPA and class rank, and we can break it down and disaggregate it. We look at our college application completion, and certainly with the FAFSA requirement, keeping track of that and an eye on who is completing. College application and financial aid forms has been important for us this year. We look at standardized test scores at all levels to look at how our students are meeting the state reference points or what their areas of need are. We look at standardized test participation for college entrance exams like the PSAT or the ACT. And certainly we look at special ed information, IEPs, 504s, supports that our students receive in order to help them to be successful and how effective those are. So as you look at this list, take note of the areas you already have access to the data from. And we'll talk a little bit about how outcome data is used. Well, we can use it to identify the needs and advocate for programming. So for our students, for example, in my school district, we had a college camp program. And we looked at the number of students who registered for college camp over the summer. And it had traditionally had a fee attached to it. And when we disaggregated the data, we looked at the fact that our students with financial need were not participating in the program. So as school counselors, we advocated with our district to provide the program for free to any rising senior. The involvement of the student, the numbers went up, and student outcomes were significantly increased for all our students across the board. We also looked at creating systemic changes based on our outcome data, looking at attendance rates of our students. We saw that after COVID, students were not attending school in the junior high. So as they transferred to the high school, we looked at what type of programming we could provide them to help them feel safe and comfortable returning to school. And we lobbied for a particular program to support the students in the most significant need areas of attendance. And that program has continued to serve our students very well. Improving attendance rates, improving outcomes as far as passing courses are required for graduation. We also use outcome data to demonstrate the impact of our school counseling program, doing surveys after our classroom lessons. And we can use that data to share our successes with administrators, our school boards, and other educational partners, such as our student support team, building administrators, district administrators, and our counseling advisory boards. The next type of data is perception data. Perception data really gathers information about how our stakeholders feel and think about our programming. This type of data can be harder to evaluate and harder to receive because it's subjective. We've listed 3 types of stakeholder surveys most frequently used in education. We use student surveys. Oftentimes our districts or our program might use parent surveys. And we also seek input from staff through staff surveys. Student surveys can really help you learn a lot about student perceptions, but are not for all ages of students and should be presented with parents being made aware that their children are being surveyed. Parent surveys help us to glean information on what parents are thinking regarding the school and counseling program. And staff surveys help to identify what support staff may need, as well as checking in on the school climate from a staff perspective. whether it is how engaged students feel in their class, perception of program effectiveness, satisfaction with leadership, access to information about student progress, workload and stress levels of our staff. All of these can be found helpful to you as you look at developing your school counseling program and determining what your priorities are going to be each year. Perception data can be very powerful and important to pay attention to. So as we look at why we use perception data, we want to think about the different types. Nancy, you're going to speak to that? Nancy?
You're muted, Nancy.
I'm muted, aren't I? Sorry about that. Perception data, as Mary said, can be subjective to the people that you are delivering the surveys to. Hang on. It can be collected as a qualitative and quantitative source of data. It does provide us with information on thoughts and feelings and beliefs of others, which can be very helpful in helping us address their needs more formally. By using both open-ended and scalable questions, responses can be measured and provide quality feedback. So using the qualitative data and the quantitative, getting feedback using scales, like Likert scales, can be very helpful. It can be used for improving and identifying areas where the school needs to focus improvement efforts, and it can address concerns from stakeholders to make the school environment more positive. Perception data should be collected periodically. It should not be a one and done piece of data. By collecting it periodically, we can track changes over time and gauge the effectiveness of the interventions that we have implemented. Mary, did you want to talk about process data?
Sure. So the last type of data we are going to discuss today is process data. We've listed here some examples of process data that are readily available to you. So process data could be the number of students who participate in an activity or intervention you plan, whether it's groups or tier 2 lessons or activities. It will include the duration of the activity, when it occurred, whether it was during the school day or after school or maybe a lunch bunch, the frequency of the activity or intervention, how often, and the intensity. So this type of data is really important to see, was your process effective in meeting your goals and the needs of the students? As with outcome data and perception data, process data is important to collect and analyze. Process data provides insight into how students interact with your learning strategies that are presented. It allows educators to better understand student behaviors. And process data can identify areas in need and improvement in the counseling program or school. And it can lead to improved student outcomes and individualized strategies based upon student needs. So let's talk a little bit about those 3 different types of data. We've provided some examples for each of you to consider. We're going to break into smaller groups for about 5 minutes. In the smaller groups, please share some of the activities you have done that fall under the 3 categories of data we just discussed. Nancy?
Okay, I'm going to send everybody into breakout rooms for a few minutes.
And while you're in your groups, think about those 3 types of data and how you've used them.
Everyone's assigned. But not everyone has joined their rooms.
No sticker for you.
I'm just assigning people that come in since we did it. Oh, Mary got assigned to a room.
Sign me, please. I don't know how I got kicked out of the room I was in.
All right. What room, do you know what room you were in?
I have no idea.
Okay, I'll just assign you to one that doesn't have as many members.
Thank you.
Give them until 4:25.
Sounds good.
They got the 1-minute warning to come back. So while you were in your groups, did you learn anything that was something you thought you might want to try back in your own district? If so, please just unmute yourself and share.
We talked a lot about the different kinds of data and what we've been able to collect. Sometimes we've been able to collect it. Sometimes it comes down to the challenge of it's there, but no time to deal with it, or the best intentions to try and put things in place, and the challenges that come with that. And just as we were getting ready to head back, I had mentioned about how when I was, as part of the requirement to finish my doctorate, doing a program evaluation. And of course, I did it on my school counseling program, K to 12, so that I could also get a vantage point of the other part of the program. And it gave me a good foothold for when there was some resistance to some changes I wanted to make. And was told that, well, the parents don't want that, or this doesn't want it. Oh, I get this here, this is that they kind of do. And that there's a reason that they want it kind of diversified. Some want this, some want that. And so it was nice to kind of have that stuff to back me up.
Thank you for sharing. Anyone else? Okay. So we're going to move on to talk about how to capture data. And we'll also discuss how to use it and how to illustrate it. We're going to look at each type of data individually as we go through the next part of this presentation. So the first one we're going to start with is outcome data. And as we had said earlier, outcome data is the data that measures the impact and effectiveness of the school counseling program on student outcomes. Much of this data can be found in your student management system through different reports that you or someone else can pull that you have access to. So here is an example of some data that I pulled on students who are failing ELA and math in grades 11 and 12. This report is a report that came from School Tool, which was the student management system that we were using. Regardless of the student management system that you have, there are report features that you can use. You may or may not have access to those, so that's something to look into if you don't. But in this data set, I wanted to look at students who had a failing average after the third quarter. So in order to do this, I wanted to see what their grades were for all 3 quarters, and then the final then their cumulative average after the third quarter, to get a better picture of their academic progress or their academic decline. So as you look at this data, you can see that some students were passing at the start of the school year and then declined. Some struggled all year, and some showed improvement as the year progressed. By having this level of detail, it helped me to craft my conversations that I was going to have with students, as well as if there was anything that I felt needed to be brought to the attention of administration. So what I did to help illustrate how to display outcome data, I pulled out just grade 11 math and just the failures for that. This chart shows the total number of students passing at the end of each quarter, which is the green bar, and then the total number of students who are failing at the end of each quarter, which is the red bar. And then the final column is the average that they had at the end of third quarter of all the first 3 quarters. So when we break this down, you can see that there were 192 students passing at the beginning of the first quarter and 22 students who were failing at the end of the first quarter. So that was 10.3% of the sample size were failing. So the sample size was 214. At the end of the second quarter, 190 students were passing, 24 were failing, and that gave us 11.2% that were failing. At the end of third quarter, 184 students were passing the third quarter, and 30 failed the third quarter, which gave us 16%. And then to total all that together to get the average after third quarter, we had 179 students total that passed, that were having a passing average, and 35 students that had a failing average at the end of third quarter, which brought us to 19.6, or almost 20% of the sample size. So what did we learn from this data? What does this tell us? Well, there's a number of things it tells us. That as the year progressed and the course material got harder, more students ended up failing, having a failing average at the end. It gives us a glimpse into some of that information. This slide shows how I took the chart and identified the number of students who are failing by teacher. And this was just another way to look at the data. So of the 35 students that had a failing average after third quarter, one of those students was from math teacher number 3, which is a 3% of the 35. 6 students came from math teacher 1, which was 17%, and 28 students came from math teacher 2. Now, on the surface, that doesn't look very good for math teacher 2. However, there's a lot more information that we need to look into before we determine what this really means. Like, some teachers have different caseloads and different course assignments. So math teacher 1 may have had only one math course that was 11th grade, and the rest of their courses could have been in another grade level. Math teacher 1 may have had 2 or 3 courses, and math teacher 2 could have had the majority of the courses in 11th grade. So there's more information to find out, but I want to take a look at this because it does raise some questions when you look at the percentage by teacher. This isn't something that I would necessarily share with teachers, but in looking at data in different perspectives, it may be something that administration may want to take a look at. It also needs to be delved into a little bit deeper to know if we need to provide supports and what supports might need to be provided to students and teachers. So the school data profile template that ASCII produced is a tool to help collect outcome data. This can be completed by support staff and then reviewed by the counselors for trends and areas needed for improvement. This, along with reports that can be pulled from your student management system, can provide a really good illustration of goal areas that are working well and areas that may need some interventions. So the school data profile template covers enrollment, dropout rate, graduation and promotion rate, attendance, information on students with disabilities, school safety, engagement data, achievement, a lot of things that we look at on a regular basis as school counselors. But this puts it together in one template for us.
Let's talk about perception data and how to capture that. As we shared in an earlier slide, perception data captures the subjective experiences and opinions of various stakeholders involved in your school counseling program. The most efficient way to capture perception data is through surveys. They allow you to gather information from a large sample quickly and efficiently, providing a broad overview of people's opinions and perspectives on a topic. Other methods like interviews, focus groups, or observations can also be valuable depending on the depth you desire for your research goals and the context of your work. There are several platforms for creating surveys that are easy for stakeholders to access. You may have used SurveyMonkey in the past, or Google Forms, Thought Exchange, or even programs like Panorama has their own surveys embedded that you can individualize to your needs. Typically, a reliable response rate for online surveys is considered to be between 20 to 25% of the sample group. And I know it can be disheartening when you only get a certain number of surveys returned or completed, but realize you really can still have a reliable response with only 20 to 25% of your sample responding. When creating surveys, there are really 2 types of questions you need to think about creating. They're open-ended and closed-ended questions. Open-ended questions require a response or an opinion-based rating scale. Closed-ended would be a Likert scale rating, check boxes, multiple choice, agree, disagree, yes or no. So it's important to have a variety of questions and to have both open-ended and closed-ended questions in your survey. Make sure before you start creating a survey that you consider the goals of your school district or your institution, and align those questions with the goals of the district or the school building to ensure that the responses you get make a difference toward the progress of achieving your goals. Conducting a survey without a goal really diminishes the value and usefulness of the survey. You've heard the phrase garbage in, garbage out. You want to be sure that you are asking quality questions that will inform your practice and will give you reliable information to use. So you want to ask clear questions. Make sure the survey questions are clear and include only one concept per question. This helps to limit the confusion and misunderstanding that may occur, and it helps to make responses more valuable. It's also really important to avoid bias. Bias happens when people let their beliefs affect their decision-making. In a survey, the order in which questions are asked can imply bias, and the structure of a question can sway responses in a certain direction. So be sure to analyze your questions and survey for any unintended bias. Keep it short. Too many questions can reduce the response rate and the validity of the survey if respondents get tired or bored completing the questions. Keeping surveys short and limiting their frequency can reduce survey fatigue and increase response rates. Follow-up. Make sure to thank people for completing the survey, act on their feedback, and follow up to show that you took note of their responses and you are looking at the results of the survey. If the results are shared and improvement is shown, people will be more likely to respond to future surveys. So here are some sample questions for collecting perception data. It's always helpful to gather some demographic information with your perception survey. Who are you asking for input from? What are various groups responding? Here are some few examples of types of questions and responses you may create. Go through some of the samples and explain the response type. The responses should be a combination of quantitative and qualitative answers. So, pretty standard. What building level are your children enrolled in? In what instances would you like to hear from your child's school counselor? Please describe how well your child's school is meeting their needs. So some short answer or longer answer questions, in addition to check boxes or yes, no, or options like what building they're in. All of these can help inform your practice, knowing who is responding and how they feel about your program and your school.
And by using the options with long or short brief answers or options to check, it provides you that qualitative and quantitative mix of questions. So here are a couple examples of some survey graph results that are generated by using Google Forms and SurveyMonkey. These are just a couple examples, but these are two platforms that will automatically generate graphs and charts for you. And it makes it much easier for you to just copy and paste them into reports or documents that you're using, like this one. So the third type of data is process data. This is information about the activities and services delivered by a school counselor and the number of stakeholders that are served. And again, this is information that is readily available through schedules, your program map, your use of time analysis chart, a number of different documents that we keep on a daily basis. So here's an example of some reports that you can use to gather process data. These are resources that are in the folder that we're going to share with you after this presentation is over. So shown here, we have a classroom and small group results report. This allows you to indicate whether it's a classroom lesson, a single classroom lesson, or a small group. It gives you the grade level, the type of presentation, what your target areas are for the Ask a Student standards. It gives you the materials and standards that you're addressing, and then your participation data as well. The other one is the time analysis chart, and this is where you're going through your own schedule and documenting what activities you're doing with students and how many you're doing it and how frequently. Another template is the NYSCA program map and outcomes map that we have shared with you in our previous sessions. This is detailed information that is very helpful in this chart. So if you look at this chart, you've got what the program activity or service is. Then you've got the columns that you can identify what the district priorities are based on the Ask a Student standards, whether they're learning strategies, self-management, or social skills. Then it gives you a column to indicate additional learning standards, health, SEL, or CDOS, the grade levels that you're addressing, whether you are addressing academics, college and career readiness, or social emotional standards. Then it asks about the tier level, is it 1, 2, or 3? Timelines, who's involved, and then you identify what type of data you're going to be collecting. And then at the bottom, it repeats the same thing, but these are for building activities. So what I did here was I took the chart that we just looked at and I filled it out just a little bit to use it as an illustration of how you can use it to report process data. You'll notice that the last column asks you to identify what type of data you'll be collecting. But as a whole report, this report can be used for process data. So on this one, I put down bullying awareness programs. I checked under the Ask a Student standards, they meet the self-management and social skills. It is an SEL New York State learning standard that we're addressing. We're going to be providing it to all students in grades 6, 7, and 8. So it is a social emotional area that we are addressing, and it is tier 1 because we are providing it to all students. And then I put the timeline down that we would be providing it during and who's involved. So classroom teachers are going to be providing this along with school counselors and social workers. And the data that we're going to be collecting will be perception and outcome data. Below that, I put in study skills, and this is learning strategies and self-management. We're going to be doing this for just students in grade 6. This is an academic area that we're going to be focusing on, and it is a tier 3, which means that we have just a few students who are going to be administering and working within the study skills group, and these students have been referred by their teachers. I put the timeline of when we'll be doing it and who will be doing it. So this will be delivered directly by school counselors, and we'll be looking for outcome data. And then at the bottom, I used for a building activity, a career fair. This covers the CDOS standards. It's for students in grades 7 and 8. It is college and career readiness. It is a tier 1 because all students in grades 7 and 8 are welcome to participate. It is only offered once, and we're doing it in March. And school counselors and classroom teachers will be taking the students to a career fair, and we'll be collecting process and perception data following this career fair. So then I wanted to take the results and illustrate them for you based on the previous chart and how you can use this for process data. So even though we indicated in some of the activities that we would be collecting perception or outcome data or process data, we can still use the activity and the number of sessions and the number of students that receive the service as process data. So in order to use this as process data, we're going to look at how many students we provided bullying awareness training to. So it was for all students in grades 6 through 8. So you see that the blue column is BA, that's bullying awareness. So we had 110 students in 6th grade, 118 students in 7th grade, and 109 students in 8th grade that received the bullying awareness training over the course of the months that we were delivering it. We sent students in grades 7 and 8 to a career fair. So that's CF, that's the lighter orange. We had 96 7th grade students participate, and we had 87 8th grade students. This was a tier 1 activity because all students in grades 7 and 8 were eligible to attend. We did not set any criteria, but not everyone attended due to absences. Had we set specific criteria that prohibited or eliminated some students from participating, it might have been a tier 2 activity or a tier 3 activity. But because we allowed all students to attend, it was a tier 1 activity. And then the study skills group, which is the darker orange just in the first set of columns. was for sixth graders only, and this was a targeted population of students. And we had 12 students who participated in the study skills groups that we offered. This is the data also for process, and it illustrates it by grade level. So I did grade 6 and 7. So we did 4 sessions for the bullying awareness in grade 6 and in grade 7. In grade 6, we had 110 students. In grade 7, we had 118 students. Then if we look at the study skills, which was available to students in grade 6, we did 8 sessions and we had 12 students participate. And then in the career fair, which is for grade 7, we did 1 session and we had 96 students participating. So this is just another way to illustrate some of that process data that we had from our program map. Oh, went too far, sorry. All right, so these are a couple more templates for data collection. They're very similar. One is a data planning and collection tool. It gives you baseline data and results data. It helps you address the curriculum of the lesson and the topic. And then it gives you different ways to collect that data. Process data, and outcome data are all included in these. The difference between these two forms is one gives you a program goal to include, and the other and it includes some mindsets and behaviors as well. So they're very, very similar forms, but they're both available in our resources, and they're ways to help you collect process, perception, and outcome data.
Here are the resources we've referenced throughout the presentation with links to the March resource folder. These are in the presentation and you'll receive these after the workshop today. So you'll have a copy of everything you need. So let's think about how to get started. The first thing you really need to do is to identify your goals. And then plan activities to support the goals. Now, sometimes you may use outcome data or perception data to identify the goals that you are going to focus on each school year. When you plan your activities to support the goals, that's really looking at the process you're going to use and who will be involved. Based upon that, you're going to identify the type of data that you will collect. You'll choose your data tool, develop it yourself, or tweak one of the tools we've shared with you to meet your needs. After you've delivered the program, then you can collect data, the outcome data, and review the success of the intervention and determine your next steps. So Nancy and I talked about this slide, and we really said, you know, it's not a 1, 2, 3. You know, you might actually collect data to start the process in order to identify your goals. You may already have perception goals that you know about, so you don't need to collect new data. So each situation that you're in will be different and unique, but these are the steps that are involved in the entire process. No matter where you start, you're going to be going through each of these steps and reviewing the outcome at the end. Any questions on how to get started? We're glad to take a few minutes to answer them at this time.
I can see if I have any questions in the chat at this point.
I have a question. Oh,
Go ahead.
okay, thanks. Something that comes up in my district in middle school is this idea of when we start counseling, as we do walk-ins and you start seeing a student and sometimes you find yourself meeting with that student week after week. And certainly it's important to have a focus, a goal. But at some point, this big question comes up of, because so many people are overwhelmed with seeing so many students, and because of MTSS, the question is, well, why are you still seeing those kids? If you already saw them, you need to, I guess, establish the outcome of the goal, stop seeing them or move them on. But especially with like little sixth graders, sometimes you find yourself needing to continue to work with them. So I guess the question is about, sometimes goal setting is a little complicated, and how are we identifying, even with kids that, how are we identifying when it's time to stop seeing somebody, or, it's just, sometimes it's a little too data driven. I don't know if I just wanted to see if you had any comments about us as school counselors being open and allowing kids to come in, but then saying, how do you make that decision to say you can't just come in every week anymore because your goal is met or whatever?
It sounds almost like, Sandy, that, your student might need a different level of service. So maybe they don't need a 20-minute or 30-minute appointment with you, but maybe they're looking for you to be their check-in, check-out. How was your day? Being welcoming, and I'm here for you, but you don't need counseling every day or every week. So I think it's looking at the level of support your student needs, and how do you provide opportunities for different levels of support so they aren't taking so much of your time.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I don't think that they're taking, in many of these cases, I don't think that they're taking up too much time. I think because so many stakeholders are watching and not everybody understands that sometimes it's good, because eventually the kids don't need as much time. But I guess I'm wondering if other people are seeing an issue with, now that people are watching, they kind of want these results, and then they want somebody to stop coming. And sometimes kids still need that time. But thank you.
I was gonna actually say, I think I agree too. I'm a high school counselor at a transfer school setting, and I do have that issue as well. Where children in the beginning, we didn't have a social worker, so they're constantly checking in with me. But I also do academic conferences and mandates, so it's hard for me, because I have a mental health background, to like close my door or just not have the kids come consistently. So I recently had a conversation with my principal, and she was like, I have to turnkey it, which I'm like, I don't have a problem with turnkey it, but our social worker just started last week. So for me, it's like, I refuse, right, to say, and I will say this openly, to not have my kids come check in with me, because they've been so used to me that it's like, now the social worker's here and I have to slowly like transition them. So I will say, I mean, I'm in New York, so like New York City, so we also have that issue here, but I'm one counselor to 150 kids in a 2-floor radius, probably a floor and a half. So when they kind of want to dive into somewhere, they come to me and they're like, okay, like I need you for like 5 minutes. But yeah, I agree.
No, we have some responses in the chat too for you, Sandra, from Joe Pena and Orphelina. If you can check those out. Joe, you
Yes,
had your
thank
hand
you.
up too?
Yeah, I just wanted to share, or I guess ask a question, and it's a little bit similar, but not so much. It's in terms of, those students who might be like frequent flyers or who just come in because they're in crisis, I know, I guess using data would be helpful. My question is, how do we capture that type of data? And, just to show like, because they might be, especially after some sort of it can even be like something that happened in the news, right? That's affecting a group of students for a period of time, and we might get more crisis than usual, right? Because sometimes they may say, like, how come you're seeing, all these students and so often, and they just come into your office, right? So, as counselors, we always have that delicate balance between Who do we see as mandated? You know, how do we keep track of the data that's required of us, but at the same time allow some space in our schedule to tend to those matters that just kind of come up, you know? It's like I feel like we're an ambulance sometimes, just kind of there, and then something happens, we have to take care of it, and then go back and do our work. So in terms of data tracking, any suggestions on how to track that kind of data? You know, for our work purposes.
We did a Google form that we had like almost like a kiosk. When kids came into the counseling, they filled out a form. And then between all of our team and the secretary, we could kind of prioritize. And then when you do the Google form, you know, you get the spreadsheet from that. We could put in notes on that. And that was really helpful. And then we would kind of coordinate, does this kid just need breaks? Does this kid need to see an outside therapist and we can make a referral? Does this kid just need adult attention and can we have the teacher just do like a morning check-in? So we would, you know, talk about those kids as a team. But we had the data by just doing a Google form when kids came into the counseling office unscheduled. So we could kind of really track who needed what and like who was also responding so that kids did feel like we were responsive as a team and we had the data to support what we were doing and what we were recommending for a student.
Teresa, I think that's a really good suggestion. Thank you, because the Google form or some type of sign-in, so you have a tracking method is to keep track of who is coming into the office is very helpful. I was fortunate to have really skilled secretaries too that would greet the students when they came in, and the kids would sign in, you know, however we had identified for them to do that. But sometimes they just needed that check-in with an adult, and sometimes the secretary was able to do that too. And you know, not that they're the counselor, but they just need to say hi to an adult and be able to do that. So, you know, having that opportunity to talk with them is what we do as counselors, and that's what we want to make sure we continue to support and don't get to the point where we're so data driven that we aren't meeting the social emotional needs of students that need to just come in and say hello or touch base once in a while. And we have a suggestion in the chat using Google Forms also as checking in and putting things in information for students to check in.
Yeah, thank you for the feedback. I just had another question because I know I don't want to take a lot of time, but I don't see that others are asking too many questions. But you know, towards the end of the school year, I think it's also important to so sometimes, you know, it get asked, you know, what were the counselors doing throughout the school year? And I know I came across like some sort of report that we can put together as school counselors. Just like with a lot of the data, like the way you were showing it with like the bar graphs and the percentages, I did so much of this and that. It's like the school counselors report, I think it's called. And I saw some ideas of it in the teachers page. So they had some like templates and stuff like that. Would you say that we should give that in, even if it's not asked of us, from admin, just sort of like a best practice, or should we do that just in case, or and just keep it for ourselves in case they ask? Or what do you think about that?
So part of our conversation on data was driven by the fact that when you do your comprehensive plan, you have to have data reports that you make to the Board of Education. And you have to have data for the advisory council to help you in determining next steps within your plan. So some of that data is data that you need to collect because you have reports that you're required to do, but some of it is going to be data that you want to collect as a school counselor to help better inform your own practices and better support the students that you have in your building and under your caseload. So I don't know if there's a right or wrong answer to that question. I always like to have data and got better at collecting it as I got more experience with it, because it was very helpful for me to have concrete information based on what we were doing to help us move our program forward. So I'm not sure I have a right or wrong answer to that, but the data is important and you can use it for yourself, but you also have responsibilities for reporting it out to others.
Thank you. That's helpful.
I see that Janelle posed a question in the chat. She asked, what data is most helpful to get more funding for our school district?
It's a really good question, Janelle. Does anybody have any suggestions?
The first thing that came to my mind, and I'm sure there's a lot to work through, because this is of course just the first thought, would be as you come up with ideas for different things that you could be doing to assist students, start to brainstorm that and turn that into a proposal or a request, and then go from there. At my old district, they used to have a specific grant writer. So a lot of times when I'd have ideas, I'd go to her and I'd say, have you seen any grants out there that might apply to this situation? Unfortunately, a lot of times she'd say no. And usually what she'd come across, she'd kind of have, it would spark the direction it needed to go to. But that would be my first thought is as you get ideas, start thinking them through, start doing proposals and have those conversations.
And I do think it depends on what you're looking to have more funding for.
Yes.
What the purpose of it is and where that funding might come from. Because some of it may be coming from the district budget, some of it may be coming from grants, some of it may be coming from outside agencies, or even the PTA might fund some things. So I think it all depends on what you're looking for and how you would then move forward in achieving acquiring that additional funding.
And talk to the people in charge of those things, because I worked in my district for 12 years, my old district, and it was 10 years in before I found out what the foundation was. That was the holder of the grant bucket for the school district. I was like, man, if I'd have known that a while ago, I'd been writing you guys, talking to you, you'd have been in my hip pocket. PTA was in Pennsylvania, it was PTG was a key place to go first, but there were certain things they wouldn't do. Mostly it was for field trips and classroom supplies that they would do, but yeah, have those conversations, find out what's available to you, and then go from there. That would be my suggestion.
I think the reference about PTSA being able to supply monies for certain things or initiatives for the counseling department has been really helpful in our school in the past. But also collecting data, like your school will collect data on, how many students receive for your reduced lunch. So when there is a class trip and you're expecting kids to pay or families to pay, that might be important information to say, no, we need to provide programs for all students. Not everybody can have access. So when you're looking to access programs versus support students' needs, whether it's for ELL populations, Thanksgiving dinners, things like that, there's different types of data you can gather from your district to support the needs of the district. And your pupil services or assistant superintendent for pupil services should have some of that data at hand.
Our district uses the CISL as our universal screener, and we have used the data from usually our pre-assessment in the fall to write grants, and they've been very successful at getting additional supports in both social, emotional, and mental health areas.
That's good information. Thank you.
Excellent. And I know One of the things you may want to do is track like referrals to outside agencies because of the severity and the level of need of your students. That data helped us acquire some additional staff at the high school for mental health supports. So looking at, keeping track of how many referrals were made to CPEP or to psychiatric hospitalization or partial hospitalization programs was very helpful for us to secure additional staffing.
Jen, I see you have a hand up.
Sorry, I already shared.
Okay. If there's no other questions, we'll go ahead and finish up. Thank you everyone for sharing and for asking questions and giving feedback and assisting with your own experiences and helping others with the questions that they had. So our last workshop is April 12th. We'll be going over annual progress reviews. We ask if there are any other topics you'd like us to cover to please place those in the chat at this time, and we'll work those into the April 12th workshop if possible. But we're very excited to be bringing you information on annual progress reviews in April. And once again, thank you for joining us. If you have additional questions, you can reach out to Mary or myself with our emails down below. And all of this information will be popped into our resources folder, and a link will be sent out later this evening or first thing tomorrow morning for you to access all the materials. So thank you very much.
Is that a Saturday? I'm sorry. Is that a Saturday?
I don't think so.
You say April 12th?
Did I have the wrong date in here? Oh, April 2nd. I'm sorry. April 2nd. I put a 1 in there. April 2nd.
Okay. No,
I'll fix it. So
thank you.
thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, of course.
We didn't catch that. April 2nd at 4 o'clock on a Wednesday.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.